ladies and gentlemen. Today we are quite happy to receive the author of a number of very good RPG publications, including the current #1 bestseller on DriveThruRPG right now, the creator of Autark Publishing, Mr. Alexander Macris. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, well, you'd imagine you'd probably be good. This baby has just hit gold seller and is currently #1, as I said. How does that feel?
Feels great. Feels great. Hitting #1 bestseller on DriveThruRPG was on my bucket list. Never really thought it would happen, and I'm glad it did.
Yeah, the publication in question is Ascendant, the superpowered role-playing game of infinite possibilities and the possibility of stopping a small caliber round if you carry it by your chest. I'm not complaining, though. It's very complete. So you started out doing fantasy RPGs. What brought you into the superhero mode?
Well, I had been a fan of superhero RPGs since high school, really middle school, I suppose. My first superhero game was the DC Heroes RPG, first edition. And that was actually how I learned logarithmic math, was from that game. And I thought, this is really impressive. And later picked up the Phase Rip Marvel Supers game, enjoyed that. Later played Mutants and Masterminds. And as I've been working on Adventurer Conqueror King system, I've gotten really into mathematically modeling various economic systems and things. And I decided to go back and look at the logarithmic system in DC Heroes, which was a truly innovative work of genius, I think. Nowadays, compared to back then, as a designer, I have access to a lot more computer software, Excel, internet, etc. It's far easier to do research. And I thought to myself, I bet one could take this basic idea of doing logarithmic mathematics for the basis of a game design and simulate everything and make the whole game completely logarithmic. And when I set out, I said, I know I can do this. I just don't know if I can make it fun. And so that was this sort of crazy challenge I set to myself: is can I make a game that's fully logarithmic and make it actually fun to play?
Yeah, because the DC Heroes game was only somewhat logarithmic, as I understand it.
That's correct. So for instance, in DC Heroes, let's say Batman has a body of 6. So that means ostensibly...
Batman's at least an 8, man.
Right, he's actually a 6 in DC Heroes. And what that means is that he's twice as good as a body of 5, 4 times as good as a body of 4, etc., in terms of his alleged toughness. But the way damage worked in DC Heroes was that meant he could take 2 3-point hits, or 1 6-point hit, or 6 1-point hits. And if you think about it, that doesn't really make sense, because a 1-point hit is much less, right, than 1/6 of a 6. It's actually 1 times 2 to the 6th less. And so I realized DC Heroes wasn't fully logarithmic. And I thought, what would it be like if it was actually fully logarithmic? What if Batman actually was 2 to the 6 times more powerful than someone with a body of 1? And I made it work.
You did, and it took a while. I think you were working on this thing for what, 2 years at least?
2 years of work, yeah, and we had 6 months of active playtesting every day. So it was by far the most playtested game I've ever written.
Well, it definitely shows. I've gone through this thing page to page, and don't think I've played it enough to give it a full review. Plus, the fact that I've known you for a couple of years now probably puts a little bit of a ethical buttress onto that one. But I must say, one of the things you can tell about an RPG is where the focus goes is by the size of the chapters. Oftentimes, you look at D&D. What's it about? Character building, monsters, magic, fighting stuff.
Yep.
Those are the biggest chapters.
Exactly.
Here it's chapters 4. If you can just I think you can't really see it because of the lighting, but chapters 4 and 7 are the biggest ones just by the size. Chapter 4 is the powers, obviously, and you went into extensive selection for pretty much any kind of superpower you can think of. You can make using this book, just going off of let's going to the most basic of powers, just blasting people with heat rays or something like that.
Yep.
You have here on page 138, and it is just a couple of paragraphs, but it basically gives base power plus all the different modifiers you can do that in order to customize it to something that's more to what you want. Like in this case, it would be a blast with thermal, like Superman heat vision, blast with thermal damage, and maybe long range modifier if you can really fire it far, stuff like that. And simple to do, maybe a bit of a learning curve, obviously, because how many people know logarithmic math and really understand it, but
yeah,
that is the downside, of course.
The game basically, once you overcome that one conceptual step of understanding the logarithmic math, the whole game flies. But you have to just walk up to the cliff and you're like, I'm going to embrace this notion that every point in the game is a doubling, and that's true across the board. Just kind of jump off.
Yeah. And one thing that was very good, though, is that at the very start, after you do a little bit of setting building, which we'll get to in a sec, but there is the, as you call them, supermetric values, the tables around page 42 there, that give you not just, the values, but also benchmarks for everything. Like, the weight of a 2000, the weight of a blue whale is 13 SPs, 100 tons, and so on from there.
Yep.
And I do like the fact, I mentioned this to my fiance, she didn't believe me at first until I mentioned it, but yeah, the -3 SPs for distance is in fact a stripper heel. 8 inches. So yeah,
there's a lot of little jokes
make this
in the
fun.
benchmarks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little jokes in the benchmarks. If you look under information, there's
complete D20 rules.
Yeah, there's a benchmark for the complete D20 rules. There's the length of a Calvin Coolidge speech, long, length of a Calvin Coolidge speech, short. If you look under time, I think that go ahead. Why don't you read what the highest SP variable benchmark is for time?
The highest for time.
Under benchmark.
George R.R. Martin release schedule. Oh, you.
Yeah. So there's the whole game is kind of littered with that. It's really tough to work on a superhero game and write 496 pages and be serious the whole time.
Yeah.
So
4 hours for the typical RPG session. That makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I wanted benchmarks that the audience would understand.
Yeah. And you went into great detail about them because there's benchmarks for density, volume, time, speed, distance, all the stuff that, given that everything gets translated into supermetric points in order to, match up with the logarithmic math and the stats of the characters, that's actually very important to give people who may not have an idea of what the hell certain things are, to have them, some examples. And
that's right.
You did a good job at that.
And there's a lot of other stuff that's also in supermetrics that is sort of not presented in your face, but down to things like joules of energy, watts of power, decibels of sound, lumens of light. Everything is actually, and it all works together, and that lets us do. DC Heroes did the very basic, time equals distance minus speed. That tells you how many time in APs it would take to travel a distance. But we've got similar formulas for everything you can think of, like how much water do you need to put out a fire? We can handle that in SPs.
That brings me exactly to chapter 7, where all this is there, and that's the other chapter, which is the actions, which comes before combat. Combat is like a fifth of the size of the actions chapter. So you can definitely see how much the extent is in terms of the priorities. Like, I also like the fact that the section on that actually tells you, doing actions in the world includes an entire bit called saving the world. And it's all about things like stopping bomb threats, putting out forest fires, dealing with a nuclear, emergency at a meltdown at a power plant, stuff like that. It really puts the focus less on, well, the focus is always going to be on beating the crap out of supervillains because it's superheroes, because that's what people imagine superheroes do. But it does, before you get to that, you're starting to get to formulas. Okay, Fukushima is about to go down. Can I stop it and save, thousands of lives?
Exactly.
And that really much puts a different spin on the whole, focus for the RPG.
Right. And it lets you make scenarios that are a lot more interesting. So for instance, one of the premises of the setting, the game comes with a setting, you don't have to use it, but all good RPGs these days come with a setting. So one of the premises of the setting is that superpowers manifest when people are under times of extraordinary stress and trauma. And so there's a villain group in the game that is a global terrorist organization that systematically tries to do acts of terror in order to provoke people into developing superheroes, because they believe that humans must ascend as our genetic destiny. And so, so what happens very often when I was running the playtest campaign is that it would be some natural disaster has been triggered by an evil villain using a superpower, and the heroes have to run and deal with they have to deal with the natural disaster that's been caused. They have to deal with the supervillain, and then they also have to deal with the spillover effects of people developing powers. And it's only a small percentage, but you know, if you read about like, well, this tsunami killed 200,000 people, which you know was the historical death rate of the tsunami in the early 2000s, you know, and 0.1% of those people manifest superpowers. Then if you're a terrorist organization that wants to create more super terrorists, that's a win. You just created a bunch more, you know, a bunch more superpowered humans. Yeah. So it's stuff like that. And that's why the saving the day rules got so much use in the playtest campaign. And people love them so much that like one of the players wants to run a Thunderbirds campaign where it's just all about saving the day.
That was exactly the first thought I had when I saw those rules. It's like, okay, we don't even need supervillains. We just need to build some, you know, superpowered vehicles using the invention rules or something like that. Because they're, of course, you know, if you're gonna have superheroes, you're also gonna have super geniuses making stuff.
Exactly.
Have those and just deal with industrial accidents and natural disasters and, you know, humanitarian crises. You could even do a game where there's none of that and it's just actual heroes, firefighters, paramedics, Red Cross volunteers in the middle of a war zone and stuff like that, dealing with, you know, humanitarian crises if you felt like it. I mean, that's just, you know, it's incredibly flexible in terms of the power levels that you can deal with. You can go full cosmic, you know, Silver Surfer or Doctor Strange style bastards, or just, you know, street level, you know, vigilantes.
Yeah, one of the things that I worked really hard to achieve is that the game is scale free. And what I mean by that, in Dungeons and Dragons, there's these breakpoints where, you know, first level, 5th level, 19th level, 14th level, all play very differently in terms of the relationship between armor class to hit, damage, etc. In Ascendant, it's scale free so that the relationship between a man with a Valor of 4 and a Valor of 5 is identical to the relationship between Valor 14 and Valor 15. It's one step is always a doubling. And that has all sorts of really great implications for the game design, because it means using the team attack rules where a team of 2 gets a +1 bonus, a team of 4 gets a +2 bonus, a team of 8 gets a +3 bonus. Likewise, multi-attacks, attack 2 people have a -1 penalty, attack 4 people have a -2 penalty. And so you can easily run scenarios where you're playing ordinary people, you're playing teams of ordinary people, you're pitting groups of ordinary people against superheroes. I mean, we've done scenarios where it's been entire army forces. You know, can 30 tanks take out a superhero is a really interesting battle. You know, we had a gravity controller going up against the US Air Force, just sweeping Apaches out of the sky. It was fantastic. And, you know, and it's just right there and it plays and it's lightning fast.
Yeah, Apache helicopters versus the black hole. That's gonna come in. That's just not nice.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really fun. You know, because he had 15, I think he had 15 or 14 SPs of gravity control, which is, you know, epically powerful. And, you know, an Apache has about, you know, 7 or 8 SPs of armor and speed. And so that difference of 6 SPs, you know, that's a difference of 2 to the 6th power.
That's apocalyptic.
2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So he was taking out, you know, 64 Apaches with a gesture easily. It was epic.
Wow. Oh man. Oh, that is epic right there. So another thing that I've noticed quite a bit, like you're going to say groups, for instance, you also have the stats for creating organizations in this that are actually that scale very much in the same way that characters do. You could probably play an organization as a character using its stats in order to, you know, directly affect worlds and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, that was actually originally going to be included in the rules, but the book ended up at 496 pages, and I've been working on it for 2 years, and I just thought I need to ship. Like I can't be Blizzard and, you know, work on it for a decade. So I would like to return to that. My other game, Adventurer Conqueror King, has a really elaborate system for running realms and domains and kingdoms. And I know that some players really enjoy that. So I figured, hey, let's at least put the baseline mechanics for organizations into the core rules. And then later, if I go into publishing an expansion, people will already have their organization set up, and then it's really easy to play them as a character.
Yeah. Well, you got a whole bunch of different organizations already statted out. Well, statted out to the basics here, like
Yep.
page 407. You got the American team, Starspangled Squadron, of course, which is lovely. Exactly the kind of team name that the US would give a superhero team, just to kind of get the PR out of the way.
Well, that's the premise of the backstory. It's worth discussing because it's interesting.
And also how you deliver the backstory is worth discussing as well, I find.
Yeah. So the game is set in our world right now, as if superheroes suddenly came onto the scene. And the premise is that the US government's Cold War projects into things like paranormal powers and telekinesis and things like that, and human performance enhancement actually paid off. And so they do begin to develop superheroes by discovering that humans have certain latent genes that can tap into 0-point energy. And they discover that these genes are becoming more and more common in the population. And so they initially figure out a way to artificially stimulate this, but it has really disastrous effects, and they end up creating a lot of villains that get out of control. And so then they have to turn to sort of homegrown people that have naturally developed these powers.
To be fair, their first test subject was a guy who was in Fort Leavenworth for war crimes. So they may have picked somebody who wasn't exactly the best test bed.
He wasn't their first test subject. He was the first test subject that survived.
Oh.
They had been testing on a lot of other people that hadn't been working. So they switched over to prisoners and then had the misfortune that the guy that it finally worked on.
A guy who lived up to his nickname that he got for, working Black Ops in the Middle East, Manticore.
That's right. So, so they end up, so now the US government has this problem, right? Humans of mass destruction are real. Like, there are people that could destroy the city of Atlanta. And so they hit upon this idea that they're going to have, and they know the American populace will be terrified if it's presented as humans of mass destruction. So they hit up on the idea that they're actually going to have the US government superheroes dress up like superheroes with silly code names and outlandish costumes, because everybody loves superheroes. And so, they're like, look, a man that can kill you with his mind from a mile away is a terrifying sniper. But if we call him Professor X-Ray and shave his head, then everyone will love him and think it's like a movie. And so that's the origin of Starspangled Squadron, and that's why it's called Starspangled Squadron, and that's why the characters are dressed up in outlandish costumes. And some of the costumes are deliberately designed to provoke controversy, because the US government, a
certain character, of course.
Yeah. So the US government would rather have people arguing on social media about whether or not it's acceptable to have superheroes in costumes like this than they would having people argue about, holy shit, the US government has superhumans of mass destruction under its employ. So,
and of course, the other governments have their own teams as well, and they're rogue superheroes running around doing their own thing.
And the other governments are doing the same thing. So like China has a superhero team, and they have a whole group that's creating manga based on their Chinese superhero team. And the Chinese superhero team has specifically made sure that they have non-Han Chinese superheroes in key positions from areas that are supposedly repressed by the Chinese government, so they can prove, no, Chinese government, look at our and of course, they're all being blackmailed behind the scenes. And the US government hits on this idea that they need the superheroes to be able to function internationally and domestically. And how do we do that? And they figure out they can make them in the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard is allowed to be both a military force and a police force. So all the US superheroes technically are members of the Coast Guard, which is hilarious. They're technically Coast Guard warrant officers.
Well, everybody needs a job. And of course,
everybody needs a job.
Yeah. And of course, all of this is explained, so to speak, through the first bit of here, where it's essentially, for those who are familiar with the concept of an epistolary novel, probably from reading Dracula or something like that, because that's one of the more famous ones. The whole thing is newspaper clippings, magazine articles, declassified government reports, social media threads. And it's just like, I have not seen this kind of storytelling method used for an RPG setting background, at least not in my memory. Also, Superhuman Manatee.
Yes, he is the spokesman for the World Wildlife Federation.
Because of course he would be.
Oh, of course he would be. Yeah. So there's some dry humor at work in the rules, and some of it people haven't noticed. One of them, so Texas, in response to the rise of supervillains, passes a law that empowers citizens to use deadly force as vigilantes. And this is issued in the game as a whole news story about this. But the joke is that law already exists. It's on the books in Texas. It's already a real law. I just cut and pasted the actual bill. It's been a law for years. Here's a vigilante in Texas. You can use deadly force, which I thought was hilarious. Another thing, so a lot of the leaked secret government documents in the book are actually cut and pastes from actual leaked secret governments documents of the US government trying to create superheroes in the Cold War. And it's like Freedom of Information Act. I found them on CIA.gov. We had all sorts of crazy plans for human performance enhancement. They're talking about like quantum mechanics and 0-point energy and all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm like, no, totally. So the reason it has like this air of plausibility is that a lot of it is actual real stuff from our clown world that I just kind of ported into the game.
These are the same kind of people who try to put a listening device in a cat at one point.
Yeah, exactly, right. One person said that they thought I had really nailed the way some of the reporters were talking during this Battle of Atlanta when the CNN building gets destroyed. And it was because I modeled all of the dialogue off of actual conversations of how reporters were talking during real life events of terrorist attacks. And, there's this very sort of stilted way they talk, and it's all just modeled right from that. So that epistolary format was really fun to write. I used to run, in a prior life, I used to run a bunch of really big journalism sites. And so I was really familiar with journalistic writing style. And so I had a blast doing it.
Yeah. Plus, it also provides not so much, it creates a setting, but it doesn't create an authoritative setting in many ways, right? Because since it's all from specific points of view, some of these things can be fact, but other things are just like some person's interpretation of the facts. Someone could be lying or all sorts of things. Like you have slight spoiler warnings for stuff, but it's in the first couple of pages of the damn book. So I'm not gonna feel guilty about this. But you have one of the world's smartest man leading an expedition to the dark side of the moon. And then next one is Air Force whistleblower condemns new lunar mission. And then contact lost with Sigma 12 moon mission. And it's like rescue mission finds space wreckage, but no survivors. What happened? Are there aliens? You're not saying. Why aren't you saying? Tell us.
Yeah, exactly. Or there's another example. There's a guy who comes out as a whistleblower against Project Ascension, and then he ends up found dead by suicide. And I just don't tell you, like, did he kill himself? Did the government off him? And I give a little disclaimer in the rule book, and I say, look, you could interpret the setting in a lot of different ways, right? You could interpret the setting as the Starspangled Squadron is an evil organization that's being used by an evil government. You could interpret it that it's actually a good organization that had some shady foundations, but they're doing the best they can. You could interpret it as a necessary evil. I just want to create a sandbox for creative people to be able to run with and give them lots of ideas for story hooks. Mm-hmm. And so the epistolary format was fantastic for that. And when later in the rules, when I provide some more organizational details, I make sure to keep it open-ended for folks. Like there's currently no canon answer as to what happened to the moon expedition.
No, well, that's always an opportunity for some kind of campaign adventure scenario, sometime later.
Exactly.
You decide to want to do that.
Exactly, and we do intend to do a comic book based on.
That's true.
In fact,
yes.
There's a 96-page graphic novel that's been written. It covers the formation of the Starspangled Squadron and their first mission. So a lot of the stuff that's in the book, it kind of does in comic book format.
Done by the same artists as the ones who did the.
Yep, done by the same art team that did the interior art for the book.
I'm working. That's gonna be good.
Yeah, I'm working with a group called Glasshouse Graphics, which is a comic book art agency, and they helped me find some really amazing talent. All the art is kind of 90s image style, which is
Oh
the
yeah.
style I grew up with and really like. It's not to everyone's aesthetic taste. Some people prefer like the Cal art style. Some people prefer, more the classic 50s, 60s style. Some people like, the very modern styles that are being used. I really liked 90s image comics, so that's the style I went with.
And people who are looking at images of Stiletto in this, thank you very much.
Well, the vast majority of the art in the book is actually backer commissioned. So it was a reward goal for the Kickstarter. And I said, here's my list of artists I have access to. If you are a high tier backer, I think we're like Super Ascendant and above, you can pick an artist and commission an image. And, apparently, the secret formula for success that I had been missing all along is math plus sexy babes, because that is the outcome.
That is the outcome, and we are all the more thankful for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty funny. Some of the commissions I got were like my character, like one guy was like, my character is a mind controller. And his powers, he can make people do anything he wants. It's like, okay, what do you want the illustration to be? He's like, he's on an armchair with beautiful babes giving him a foot rub. I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean,
that's if I recall correctly, that is a character called BFF, right?
That's BFF. That's correct.
Yeah, it's basically the thing. And it's not just mind control. Well, at least it's kind of mind control. He doesn't tell you exactly what to do. He just makes you feel like you're his best friend.
Yeah, that's his power. Like he just makes you just feel like he's your best friend. And so he's
and he could be a horrifying supervillain, but it turns out he's just a stoner dude who just likes getting free beers and just
he's like a stoner dude who likes to hang out, watch TV, get free beer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But you do mention that he's kind of like ambivalent about it. It's like, man, do I actually have any real friends? Because everybody's my friend, but it's not their choice. And there's that thing you mentioned at the end of his description where time will tell whether he gets drunk on this and goes full supervillain or tries to be a better person and try to use this for good, like do hostage negotiations or something like that. That'd be imagine that, a hostage negotiator for the for FBI or something like that. It goes into a terrorist situation. Is like, we will kill everyone here. Oh man, come on. Get here. Can I have a beer? Oh, just because it's you.
Yeah. So the premise of the superpowers is that these latent genes in your body, when they express, your body begins to produce metaplasts. Which are similar to chloroplasts in plants. Chloroplasts in plants allow them to take solar energy and use it for biological purposes.
Where metaplasts allow them to tap into 0-point energy and actually convert that to actual, effects in their physical world.
But the means by which you convert the 0-point energy is up to your conscious. And so the superpowers tend to manifest in a way that's wish fulfillment, based on the set and the setting in which you acquire the powers. So BFF was a really low charisma, unlikable guy. And so his desperate wish fulfillment was that everyone would like him. And now everyone likes him, but the curse is that they all like him because of his superpower. Yeah. And so he's kind of got this. One of the characters in the game was called Aurora, and she was a sort of like a B-tier Instagram celebrity who desperately wanted to be a star. And so, she just wanted to like dazzle in the spotlight. And she gave me
does now.
Yeah, and she does now. But of course, is it because of who she is or just because of these powers? And so she's like racked with doubt. Another one of the characters was American Eagle, who's he was a military veteran who wanted to fight for freedom. Then he was a firefighter, wanted to defend people, and so his whole thing was he wanted to save lives and defend people. And so he acquired like a Superman type power set. And then the main villain in the setting is a character named Maximilian Danixjold, who was a professor of Nietzschean philosophy, who believed that that you needed to transcend humanity, that humanity is something that needed to be overcome, that there's a master morality, and that that which does not kill us makes us stronger. And so his power, he's the most powerful ascendant in the world, and his power is literally direct control over the 0-point energies.
Yeah,
and he's
cosmic
the one that,
power.
Cosmic Power. He's the one that founds this terrorist organization, where he's trying, basically, he causes havoc, and then you either die or you transcend humanity.
And while wearing some pretty badass powered armor, he's like a cross between Magneto and Doctor Doom. So,
yes, but he's also like
Doom's philosophy.
Exactly, and he's literally a former professor of Nietzschean philosophy, tenured professor, and just mastered it through will. So he's a very interesting villain, and kind of the confrontation between this sort of very cultured European aristocratic professor who is literally wants to destroy people in order to make them better, and then this Nebraska corn-fed firefighter who wants to save people, and those are the two in the backstory. Those are the two most powerful ascendants. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, one, basically turned himself into a super villain just, out of sheer will and, focus of effort. The other guy became a superhero by, just risking his life, saving a couple of kids from a burning building. So there's that, self-made man, but towards a darker path versus someone who just kind of lucked into it, but was in the right spot at the right time to do some good.
And also, but more than just luck, he also had the virtue to do it, right? He ran into the burning building.
Yeah, he chose to go into, not luck. He chose.
Exactly.
Both of them chose their path, essentially.
Right.
But one chose it through selfish reasons, and the other one chose it for selfless reasons.
Exactly.
So they make not only just, one's, super powered, but in a kind of like evil sorcerer kind of way where he has direct control over reality in certain ways.
Exactly.
And the other one's more like, physical, punchy, kicky kind of guy. But there's also that, philosophical opposition as well, which that's very good, character balance right there.
Yeah, and Maximilian Danixjold is actually a reference to Ragnar Danixjold from Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand's philosophy was objectivism, which was that which starts with the premise that reality does not bend to your will, and so the rational person has to adapt to function in the world using their reason.
But now you got somebody who can bend reality to his will.
Exactly. And so I thought to myself, what would happen if you took someone who had the egoism of Ayn Rand, but was able to bend reality to their will? And I thought to myself, that would be a very, very scary man. And of course, it's a little known, but in the first edition of her first book, We the Living, Ayn Rand was actually an explicit Nietzschean, and she later abandoned that because she decided that Nietzsche put the will priority over reason. And so I thought, if you could bend reality to your will, you would prioritize the will over reason.
And you become a very unreasonable person.
And you become a very unreasonable, very scary person. And so that's Maximilian Danixjold. And so he's this kind of dark side figure, but at the same time, a very interesting villain, I think, and hopefully more interesting than a run-of-the-mill villain. And then we also have Stiletto, who is an important character in the setting. She had been a spoiled rich brat who essentially gets disinherited because it turned out her parents were crooks. And so she loses everything, ends up, using her high society connections to build a clientele of rich men who enjoy being dominated, which is a whole scene online that's devoted to that. And becomes this dominatrix for very rich men, but then has very, very bad events befall her because one of the rich men accidentally gets exposed, and he turns out to be a criminal, blames her for the exposure, and so he has her killed.
Of course, she doesn't stay dead.
That's right. The death doesn't stick, and she comes back. And of course, because your superpowers are based on sort of these internal drives and motivations, and the setting of what happens, well, hers come in the middle of this, of sort of being a dominatrix and then being murdered by a client. So she comes back pretty psychically damaged from that, but also incredibly badass, and is constantly kind of teetering on the line of anti-hero, hero, villain.
Yeah. And, coming with the ability to, with claws, to shred through sheet metal, and the willingness to use them.
That's right. So she's like Wolverine, but kills people.
Well, Wolverine kills people too.
It depends on the comic, right? Like, you know,
well,
you
that's
read
always
that,
the thing with comics, isn't it?
yeah,
Because these
like,
characters have been around for so long that they've been interpreted and reinterpreted dozens of different
right,
ways, depending on not just the author, but also the age rating of the comic in question. Yeah.
right, 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 exactly. And
Which is
and
something
then
you may do a bit also at the end here. There's, certain like for the game mastering section for how to tweak, things like character death, combat lethality,
yep, yep,
character degradation if they lose certain abilities and stuff like that, how that affects their point values and stuff like that. That you can
exactly.
then tweak, like, you have the example of a guy who's in the middle of an atomic explosion. It comes out of it sunburned, naked head to toe, lying in a smoky crater for the less than lethal version.
Right. That's like your Silver Age comic where nobody ever dies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different dials built into the game. So you can play anything from a Golden Age World War II comic, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, Modern Age. The game kind of defaults. I call it Iridium Age because it's definitely it's like the modern day kind of Steel Age comics, but it's heavy metal. Right?
Yeah.
So,
No, that is definitely my kind of style right there. So yeah. So definitely I can see why this game got so popular now that, just looking at it and looking at, all the thought that went into it, you can definitely see just going over it and going over, your description of like that, going to like chapter 2, which is just core mechanics, for instance. And you can really see a lot of, very good explanation. You do a lot of good jobs at explaining what each of these concepts implies and, how to go about using them and stuff like that. Oh, and I do like the chart, by the way.
The chart, the challenge action resolution table, or chart.
I love a good acronym. Like one of the things, like this isn't the only RPG I've used that has some kind of like resolution chart, which I think the idea came from FaceRip, the Marvel RPG, right?
Straight out of FaceRip. Yep.
Yeah. But the difference here is that, like, unlike FaceRip or the old TSR Conan RPG, which also had a similar, mechanic like that.
Great game.
Zephyrs. Oh yeah, it's a great one. But this one is limited in scope. It's only like from -6 to 6 in terms of the result value, which is determined by taking your stat versus the difficulty or the other thing's stat, modify, subtract, and then just roll based on the result you get there. So it's basically, this is the kind of chart that will fit on the character sheet.
Right, and they do, like, they're just on the character sheet, just right there in front of you.
Which is something I appreciate a lot. It's one of the things I liked about Axe, for instance, your other RPG. The attack throws and stuff like that are all on the character sheet. And for me, when I was introducing people to the RPG, which we'll get to after I'm done with this one, because I want to talk about Axe too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's that when I'm introducing someone who's new to RPGs to that, those attack throw resolutions, having them right there on the sheet, that is very helpful. It's like, okay, what do I need to roll? It's written right there. Oh, okay. And just like, add the armor class to that, roll the dice, modify. Is it higher than that? Use hit. If not, too bad.
Yeah. So. The chart is pretty fun. So it goes -6 to +6 because the logarithmic scale differences beyond that are so profound that there's essentially no chance of failure, no chance of success. And the way it works is, so let's say I have a Valor of 10 and you have a Valor of 10. So we're equally skilled fighters. What'll happen is I have a 50% chance of hitting you, you have a 50% chance of hitting me, okay? But now let's say that my Valor is only 9 and yours is 10. Okay, so now yours 10 to 9. So now when you look at the chart, you're at +1, I'm at -1. And if you look at the way the chart works, what's going to happen is you're going to see that you now have a 67% chance of hitting me, and I now have a 33% chance of hitting you. So each 1 point on the chart is a difference of 1.41. But because you're 67% to hit me and I'm 33% to hit you, you now hit me twice as often as I hit you. So that 1 point difference has actually created a doubling in fighting power.
Yeah.
The same thing is true for weapon damage and armor and damage resistance. And so one of the really neat things about the game is that for any given combination of valor and might, that is to say, chance to hit and damage dealt and hit points, for any given combination, the expected rounds to kill the enemy is always the same. So if I'm 10 valor, 10 might, or 9, 11, or 8, 12, or 12, 8 versus your 10, 10, 11, 9, whatever it is, the expected values are always the same. What changes is the swinginess. So the character who's got really high valor, low might, is a lot more likely to hit, but he'll do less damage each time. And so he's the equivalent of a guy who's throwing a lot of quick jabs. The character who is the really high might, low valor will be very swingy. Most of the time he'll miss, but occasionally he'll get that real killer punch. And then the game gives you options to do combat maneuvers, to change, like I'm gonna do a fast attack, which lowers my might but increases my valor, things like that. Also lets you do team attacks. And so you can stack up really interesting things. Like, for instance, let's say that I'm the character who's hits accurately but doesn't hit often. But can I team up with the character who hits really hard, such that we're using my to hit throw and his damage and things like that. And so all these combinations begin to unlock for team combat that get really fun.
Yeah, you do the fastball special. You have the really strong guy throw the other guy who does a lot of damage with claws and stuff, and just
and you can
combine those values.
Easily handled in the game. Exactly. And so the and again, because it's all perfectly logarithmic, that works at every scale, works no matter how many combatants you have. So it's neat. That chart is essentially that was the thing that took me the longest to work out, was that core relationship. And once I had that, it was like the whole rest of the game flowed. It was like I had seen the Matrix, and it just went from there.
Well, you've certainly done a very good job on that one. And I can really see the kind of, having played Axe previously, Adventurer Conqueror King, and looking at this, I can definitely see your design philosophy extending to across both. You can really see like the rules, not as a narrative instrument, but more as the physics of the world in which the game takes place in.
Correct.
And with the GM acting as the kind of neutral arbiter over the whole thing.
Correct. That's absolutely my style. I mean, there are, guys like Jason Morningstar who wrote Fiasco, right? Absolutely fantastic narrative game designer. If you want a story game, like you play a Jason Morningstar game, you're gonna have a great time sitting down at the table with your buddies and telling, a crazy story. That's not the sort of game that I design. Mine are absolutely, rules as physics. If you subscribe to GNS theory, they're simulationist in style. It's a style that I personally think has been neglected for a bit. And I think has more people that like it than the market serves, which I think is part of why Ascendant has met with good market response. It's not to everyone's taste, but I don't think that, every game has to be for everyone.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, we have, a really rich diversity of games available to us.
Exactly. If you don't like a particular game, there's chances are there's another one that has the same kind of, if not themes, and at least the same genre, but a different kind of rule sets that'll serve your interest much better.
Yeah, if you want to, like, for instance, if you want to play like a rules light, narrative-driven superheroes game, you've got Icons, right? Fantastic game. Steve Kenson, brilliant game designer. Icons is awesome. Interestingly enough, Steve is such a good game designer, he was able to create both Icons and Mutants and Masterminds, which is a very crunchy system. Like, there you go, and you think, well, why did he need to create both games? It's like, well, they're actually for different people. And so I think my sweet spot is definitely rules as physics, simulation, and also I would say systems that are really super coherent, right? Like the Axe system is known for its economic coherency and design coherency. Ascendant is the most coherent game I've ever created. Like I don't think I could make I don't think I could make something more systematic than that.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is the kind of game where I can take stats off of Wikipedia or the CDC or the CIA World Fact Book, stick them in there, and have okay. So I have to know the particular transmissibility of this particular bioweapon. Okay, done. I got statted out.
That's literally what it's doing. Like for the diseases in the game, it's like looking up the R0 scores. And you can actually calculate the infectiousness. If you know the kinetic energy and diameter of a projectile, you can work out its in-game stats. Like, now I've done it all for you, so you don't have to. But if you're the sort of person who does like to open up the hood and look in, like I always make sure to give the designers notes so that you can open up the hood.
I mean, we're nerds. Of course, we like to open up the hood and look into it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I certainly at least the people that play my games seem to.
The way I've always thought of it, like I'm actually more of a video game guy than a tabletop guy, just from sheer ability to find people to play it with. Just that's how it works, Mostly just find people to play the kind of things that I like. But I've always said that Adventurer Conqueror King is D&D for the people who are fans of Mountain Blade and Crusader Kings.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
the kind of thing, Sandbox Focus, lots of, stuff behind the scenes stuff happening in the domain levels and stuff like that. And depending on the kind of dials you turn on that, you can get the same levels of skullduggery as you get into that kind of
Exactly.
stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always loved in the video game world, my favorite video games have always been the ones that have two tiers of play. And the three I reference are the original XCOM UFO Defense, the original Shogun Total War, and Master of Orion 2.
Mhm.
And in each of those games, you have the tactical level, like you actually get to move your ships around and fight the battles in turn-based Master of Orion 2, or XCOM's tactical battles. You have the tactical level, and then you also have the strategic level. And I really love games that have that sort of vertical integration of power level. And that was what Axe was trying to achieve for D&D. You could literally play this as an emperor and send your armies out. You can play it as a first level adventurer, and you can play it as a first level adventurer who carves his way to glory to become the emperor. And it all just works.
You also created your own war game that ties in directly with Axe Domains of War, which you can take characters from one and translate them. You don't even need to translate them; just plug them straight into the other one, and you've got yourself, the generals of an army. Or you can take a squad of soldiers from one of the Domains of War units, stick that into an adventure, and all of a sudden you got the stats for that too. No problem.
Right. Yeah. Domains of War was inspired by some of my favorite tabletop games, which are Tactica and Armati by Artie Conliffe and Bellus Antiquitatis, and Command and Colors. And so I wanted to have, something like that for D&D, but something with that much tactical depth and robustness, but completely compatible with your Axe campaign, so that your fighter Rufus the Red can go be, the Alexander the Great on the battlefield. The very first game I ever designed was actually a war game. My game design mentor was Artie Conliffe, who designed Spearhead and Crossfire and Armati and Shaco and Tactica, which are back in the 90s and early 2000s were very popular in the historical miniatures community. And he was my game design mentor. And the first game I designed for him was called Modern Spearhead, and it was about modern armored combat from the period of post-World War II to the year 2000. So Cold War battles, Gulf War, Arab-Israeli conflict, So war games came very naturally to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you did go to West Point.
I did. I was the part of the West Point War Games Committee for 2 years there. I ended up leaving West Point after 2 years. Turns out that you have to have a strength of 9, and I had a strength of 7. So
well, I didn't spend too much time in the army myself, so longer than that, but
yeah. Well, you what did you do in the army? You were
signals operator, Canadian Army.
Right.
Yeah, in the movies, the guy who has the radio on his back, this guy.
That guy always gets killed.
Yeah, so it's probably a good idea not to spend too much time there. Well, I got a work ethic out of it, so it's at least that.
No, it's good. Listen, I think of my time in the army as the most valuable time that I ever spent in my life. Like, holy crap. It was great. I just, it was funny when I was at West Point, like, your class rank, it's divided into 3 categories, right? So like, we had 1,000 students. My class rank was like 46 academically. So I was, very, very near the top of the class. My military rank, which is like uniform, formation, drill, was like 600 something. And then my physical class rank, I was like 918. And, my tactical officer, your tactical officer is supposed to sort of advise you about your best career path. And they talk about, how you're supposed to have the 3-legged stool of balancing academic, physical, and military. He was just like, Macris, you're like a 1-legged man hopping up and down here. Like, what are you doing? And, it's like, if I had picked any other college in any other career, I would have been, at the top of the field. But, I was middling because, frankly, I couldn't do a pull-up to save my life. Like, I was 6'2" and 140 pounds. Like, I was a rail. And I'm like eating 4,000 calories a day and losing weight. I just could not pack on muscle. And so eventually I thought, I don't meet the prime requisite. I just don't have it. Years later, I did this, the genetic testing you can do nowadays. And I found out I literally have genes for slow recovery time. So my muscles don't need extra time to recover from workouts. And so with daily training in the army, that's why I just kept getting thinner and thinner. I was just burning and burning and burning. And
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think I could have convinced the military, like, listen, I'm going to need a week off after the road march.
Oh, yeah, that does not fly.
Yeah. Just
You can try, but you're gonna get your
yeah.
ass kicked.
Genetically speaking, I have a mutation that says that I need more time off than the other cadets. No. So anyway.
Yeah, that's the breaks, huh?
Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my first encounter with the reality that in fact you cannot do everything.
Yeah, true. Although you did, for going back to Domains of War, you may not be able to be a frontline fighter, but you can definitely have other impacts on the thing. You added rules for how other classes beyond just the fighting ones can do stuff. Like, for instance, having a thief hijinks, as you call them, that can act as scouts or saboteurs in the enemy army, spies, and stuff like that.
Absolutely, magic effects, clerical effects. Yeah, absolutely. The idea of Domains of War was that your adventuring party could just would roll right into being almost like your staff. So you could have your commander, your adjutant, sub-commanders, your bard can inspire the troops, etc. So the whole group can play on the game, play the war game as well as the RPG.
Exactly, and you can have the enemy do the same kind of stuff to you.
Yeah,
very much. Fun. Yeah, so really, when it comes down to acts and going again to your design philosophy, I see like one of the recent publications you made for acts. Looking over here, came out along with the Adventure Secrets of the Nether Sea. Was this one, Capital of the Borderlands?
Yep.
This one is really, really good. Aside from the fact that it's got this sweet ass Michael Sirigos cover, which can you tell me how you got in touch with that guy? Because he's been doing the major cover art for your books as of late, and I gotta say that is exactly my style, sir.
I don't even remember how I met Michael. I think he might have emailed me out of the cold one day. But I really loved his style. He's like the reincarnation of Frank Frazetta.
I was gonna say the Frazetta is strong in this one.
Yeah, and since the default setting of Axe is a Ursat's Roman, Greco-Roman setting, it works really well with the Frazetta look. You can easily imagine Frazetta drawing Spartans and things like that. So it's a really great fit stylistically, and he's just super talented and easy to work with, and really very, very thoughtful about his work. It's my first real steady relationship working with a cover painter. And some of the questions he asked me, like, this wouldn't have even occurred to me to think about. Like, we're working on a dwarven supplement, and he really wanted to know, like, what was the dwarven attitude towards fortifications? Like, should they inspire you to think, I would never even dare to assault that? Or should they be, I can't even see that, like, it's so subtle? Or should they be grandeur and stately? Should they be come at me, bro? Like, all these, he is asking me all these philosophical questions about the dwarves. Because he wanted to have like the right feel for the painting.
Yeah, makes sense.
Really sharp guy.
Yeah. Like, I'm looking at this thing, and not only most excellently illustrated and everything, and it has the same kind of level of detail that I've seen in Ascendant in many ways, only applied to not just a single city, the capital of the Borderlands region in the Oran Empire setting, but also the tables and the descriptions of encounters that can be had in various areas, and building your own city based on these kind of concepts. That is based, as far as I understand it, data taken from the ruins of Pompeii, as I understand it. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I found a lot of information on the ruins of Pompeii, and so I went and I entered into a database all of the identified or suspected building types and the sizes and everything. And I use that to model what would be the number of cantinas and the number of taverns and the number of homes and the size of them, et cetera. And I use that as the basis for our dynamic generation system to dynamically generate a Roman style city. Obviously, we as gamers always underestimate how much variance there is historically between things. So if you said, oh, well, I'm just going to use this to generate my Parisian 17th century, it would be laughably wrong.
Yeah.
But, for a game, most people don't care that much. And at least for the Oran Empire setting, it's quite plausible outcomes.
Yeah. And since I prefer settings that are antiquity rather than medieval, that's more my kind of style anyway. So I tend to focus more on that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it works out.
Yeah.
It was actually exceptionally amusing. Like I discovered so much I hadn't fully grasped about how modern the Romans really were. Like, you know, they had fast food restaurants, right? Like you could just walk up and they had heated food available, and you know, their equivalent of ketchup was fish sauce, and you just pick it up and, you know, pay your money and you know, have a
They had
bite on
fast
the go.
food joints.
Yeah, fast food joints. Everything you can think of. They had high-rise apartment buildings, you know, sewers, you know, toilets connected into the sewer system. It was heated floors. Like I don't have a heated floor. Freaking Romans had heated floors.
There you go. Well,
yeah.
some Romans had heated floors.
Yes, some Romans, and I guess some Americans have heated floors too, which I guess, you know, some things never change.
Yeah, true. Well, you know, them's the breaks, as they say. Some people get heated floors, others people get to sleep at night.
Yes. Well, I have the same floors as you. I have nice hardwood floors, but they're not heated.
Oh, this isn't hardwood. This is vinyl, or I think over vinyl over wood or something.
Well, it looks like hardwood. It looks very nice.
Oh, it is very nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Provided you don't scuff it up, which, you know, I try very hard not to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing some gradually doing some renovations all over the place, you know, redoing some holes in the walls and, you know, fixing things up, you know, but, you know, that takes time.
Yeah, it does. It's a lot of work.
Indeed.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, almost as much work as creating a whole new superhero RPG that actually covers the laws of physics in a realistic way.
No way, man. I would create another RPG again before I had to do any work around my home. I am just the least skilled human being at such tasks as you can conceive. It's like I took drawback, like unable to function mechanically in order to get like extra character points for design RPGs, which was a really bad character build, frankly. But
yeah, that's the problem with life. Life is GURPS system, but using a random care gen.
Yeah. Well, you know, like I joke at my wife, who you know, is extremely intelligent, you know, very attractive, very sociable, was, you know, very strong when she was in high school, you know, runner, equestrian, but, you know, she's disabled with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which gives her, you know, constant fatigue and exhaustion. So like the joke in the household is never make Constitution your dump stat.
There you go.
So, you know, but obviously random chance, as you say, it's a game of GURPS and you're rolling it randomly.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that it wasn't random is the success for Ascendant, and I'm hoping for much more than the upcoming, that's for sure.
Well, look, I'm so grateful to see it succeed. I did not think that my 500-page game based on logarithmic math would find a huge audience. That has caught me quite off guard, not something I predicted to begin 2022. But you know, it has, and that's just fantastic, and I'm really thrilled. So, you know, the Discord channels like doubled in size in a week, and
oh yeah,
had to create extra channels for people to talk about character optimization, and it's great. It's awesome. I'm thrilled, and I'm so grateful to the art team and the editors and the playtesters. I mean, you know, 6 months of playtesting every day, those guys.
Oh yeah, well,
made the game so much better.
Considering that many RPGs don't get any playtesting before they go to print, yeah, that is impressive right there.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, that's a real shame. Playtesting is underutilized, and I guess the margins on tabletop gaming are just so slim. It's so tough to make money that, you know, you just have to crank out content, and so a lot of content gets released without playtesting. And
yeah, I guess that's one of the advantages of having a Discord open, so that, you know, you have some people in there and you can ask for, you know, people, hey, who wants to play test this thing? I have, you know, open slots like that. You can use voiceover and stuff like that, voiceover Discord, and it really helps, you know, getting that, you know, ball rolling, so to speak. Before, it's amazing just how much, you know, the internet and social media and stuff like that has altered the way, not just how RPGs are played, but also how they're developed over time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, if you know, if I hadn't already had the Axe Discord set up, I never would have had access to that, right? Like I had an existing community that I could tap into, you know. And to design Axe, I was really fortunate. I was working from the, you know, the baseline of the existing SRD for Dungeons and Dragons, and then I did 120 sessions of playtesting. But you know, even there, you there's still stuff years later I'm finding, I'm like, oh, that could have used more playtesting. So.
Yeah, that is something I wanted to ask you about. The Axe is based on a BXD&D, like you say, the Dungeons & Dragons SRD, baseline,
Yep.
like so many OSR, RPGs, of course.
Right.
Whereas Ascendant is very much its own thing, while inspired by the things. It's not a direct, there's no SRD, basis for that.
No, there's not.
In terms of like, designing an RPG based on an existing chassis versus one created from scratch, how does the, process change based on that?
Oh gosh, it was hugely different. So Axe emerged very organically. I started playing BX, and then I got these notions in my mind of wanting to have, the Empire element. And I started pulling in different modules I had found on the web, and BECMI and Rules Compendium and War Machine, and then replacing components, plugging them in, replacing stuff, trying out new ideas, going on to Dragon Split, talking to people there, getting ideas. And then 120 sessions later, I had like a 40-page document of my house rules. And then it was a matter of taking Labyrinth Lord, which had been made open source, and then combining that with my house rules and rewriting everything to make it into the RN setting and making sure everything was coherent. And so that was, so most of the work there was done sort of over the course of the campaign. Ascendant, like, I'll just show you, like, Ascendant is like, these are my like handwritten notes of
wow,
just crazy, like mad scribbles to myself of numbers and like complaints to myself, like I'm writing, I can't figure out the physics of stopping falls, and I'm just like,
is that for stiletto or
just in general? Like this one is like, this one on the back here, I'm literally swearing at myself, fuck, over and over and over again.
I gaze into the mind of Alexander Macris.
Like, this one here, I'm like doing vector chart diagrams. It just
scribbling
more,
flying manatees into the margins.
More vector chart diagrams, like, so imagine this, and my wife will walk in with a textbook. I've got a textbook of physics open. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm gaming." It's just so. It was a really different experience. I mean, and the weird stuff that I ended up researching, like I'm certain I am on all
several FBI.
Oh yeah, because I'm like researching, like, how do you calculate the armor penetration of a ballistic shell? How do you create diseases? What's the blast radius of a fertilizer bomb? Like all this crazy research I'm trying to do. And they're gonna. I was thinking Steve Jackson actually got rated for his.
I know for his cyberpunk supplement for GURPS. Yeah,
so I could
by the Secret Service.
I could totally see them showing up, and and if the federal government came, I had a plan. I was just going to give them a stuffed manatee and show them the game, and just be like, it has manatees.
They're cute. It has a little cape fluttering. It's adorable.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. He's my favorite character, Levity. He's a flying manatee who wisecracks and makes people feel good.
It works as a pun. It works as an actual name. It just works.
It just works. Yeah.
And
he helped, and he's for a good cause. He saves the manatees.
Yeah.
It's a good cause.
Yeah, exactly. Not like that horrible Negaverse version, Depravity.
Yes, that's right. The players have been demanding an undersea supplement, which would have like all of his enemies, Depravity, it could have like the kinetic energy controlling velocity, and just like, oh yeah.
Oh god. Leave it to a bunch of nerds to take a side joke and turn it into the main course.
Oh, I mean, the hot sex appeal sidekick sorority. Like, I mean, it just
oh god.
Can't go there.
It's like you create a side NPC for something, for just sort of a minor encounter. The players just glom onto that instead of actually going on the adventure for 3 hours straight.
Yeah, exactly, right. And they become like this runaway. Yeah, like everybody loved levity, and they were like, there's this joke in the game that levity plushie dolls become like a best-selling Christmas gift.
And so what did you do?
So I actually made levity plushie dolls. I put them on sale. We're almost sold out. They're like adorable. They're like little plushie dolls with capes.
Oh,
So my wife has a huge stuffed animal collection, so she's added it as now she has a stuffed super manatee, I guess.
no, that is so nice.
It's pretty funny.
Oh.
Pretty cute. So.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
I don't know, man. When the FBI comes, I'm showing them the manatee. That's my plan.
Yeah. I mean, it's your best case scenario, I think.
My best case scenario. I think at that point. Yeah.
Is there anything about Axe you would have changed if you had made it completely from scratch? That or is there like things about the setting that would have been different if you hadn't used a BX basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So after I published Axe, I came out with a supplement called Heroic Fantasy Handbook,
Which we have
is,
right here. Wait a sec. Oh yeah, right here.
Yep. Okay. So Heroic Fantasy Handbook, and that has a lot of alternative rules for a different magic system, which I called Eldritch Magic, which feels more like the magic from Conan. And I think if I had been starting from scratch, I probably would have designed the game around Eldritch Magic rather than.
I won't run Axe without that handbook anymore. Simple as that. I consider it part of the base rules.
I'm glad you like it. Yeah, it as with anything, it had mixed reception. Some people loved it and thought this is the supplement I've been waiting for, and other people were like, "No way, man! You can't even cast a fireball. It sucks." So
can't even cast a fireball. You can infiltrate people's dreams and corrupt their souls from within.
Yeah, but you can't cast a fireball.
Sure you can. It's called a globe of eldritch fire. Just toss it and explodes.
Yeah, but it's higher level. And yeah, so so that'd be one thing I change. If I was going back totally doing it from scratch, like who knows, right?
Yeah.
But that's definitely one tweak I would have made. I think the other thing I would have done is I would have much more closely integrated my setting of Arran Empire with the rule book. I really, as a sort of a marketer, I think I really underestimated how much art and setting sells games. And even with Ascendant, I originally didn't plan to even do a setting. I just was going to do a generic, superhero game system. And one of the guys on our Discord named Second, basically had like this come to Jesus conversation with me, where it's like, this game is great, but I'm not going to let you release it without a setting, And I was like, oh, fine.
Oh yeah, because a setting essentially dictates what the limits are for the system in certain ways. Because
right.
Like for instance, for the Arran Empire, you're not having like wuxia superhero kind of fighters and wizards and stuff like that. It's more, I don't want to say down to earth, but it's a bit more gritty in that regard. Because of the because of the way it works. If you'd gone with something a bit more over the top, your system would have had to follow in order to keep up.
Right.
So, depending on, the setting dictates what systems are appropriate for it in certain ways, and vice versa.
That's right. And also, even if, so my thought is that game masters must create all their own settings, right? Because, you constantly look around, you're like, oh, this is my homebrew world, this is my homebrew map, homebrew setting. So I just figured nowadays most game masters prefer to run their own setting. I think one that was wrong, as the popularity of 5th edition's pre-built settings has really proven. But also, what I've realized now is that even if they are going to build their own setting, they really like to see your setting to give them an understanding of how the game better works, and to give them stuff to steal. And so I think if I did Axe again, like if I did a 2nd edition of Axe, I would definitely tightly couple it to the setting, not to in any way tie the GM's hands. Like it would still be the exact same rules, and it would still open up the hood and let you play around.
But to provide more examples of how these apply how the rules apply in an actual setting.
Exactly. And also make it easier to use out of the box, right? Because a lot of people are busy, and it turns out they don't want to sit around and, create a map of the world at a 6 mile hex limit. Who knew? So yeah. I mean, so that would be my 2 mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many actual people buy adventures and stuff like that and never actually run them and just read them?
Yeah, a huge amount, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and that's where the art comes in, right? Because a big reason people buy RPG books is because they just enjoy reading the setting and looking at the art.
Mhm.
And if you don't like, I know way more people, for instance, have bought Numenera than have run Numenera campaigns, because Numenera is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's got great art to it.
You just want to own that book and put it on your coffee table and like show people when they come over for pastries. Like, it's fantastic. And I admit, like, I own Numenera. I love the art. I've never run the game.
Yeah, I trimmed down a lot of my RPG collection simply because of that. I've got a couple of collector's items that I have just mostly for the fact that I collected them, and they're kind of hard to find these days. But beyond that, I kind of took out a lot of games I donated to an RPG club near here that were just ones that I had, but I never was really never gonna use at one point, and just never been able to find players for. It's like, it's one of those things that happens. And nowadays with digital files and PDFs and stuff like that, sometimes it's more useful to just have those instead of the physical items, simply because they're not going to take massive amounts of space on your bookshelf for something you're not actually going to use in real life. That's where you get the physical stuff for.
Yeah, you're right. There, and I probably need to do that, but I haven't yet been able to. I'm at that stage where it's like, you touch the Shadowrun book that you haven't played in 30 years, and you're like, oh my God, do you remember when we were 15? And it's like, that's always the part I have trouble with in cleaning out my collection of things. I
think that's everybody who has a collection of things has that problem, just by definition.
By definition, yeah. Which is probably why like hiring movers is so much more efficient than doing it yourself, because it takes me 30 days to pack like one room. Yeah, your mover comes in, he just throws it all in a box.
Yeah. There's no emotional attachment. You're not taking a moment to reminisce every time you pick out one of the things in your bookshelf.
We need like what is it? Is it Mary Kondo? Is that the one who does the cleaning up, like simplifying your life? It's like, I need a Mary Kondo for role-playing gamers. So
well, you didn't have that, but you do have a book for teaching them how to master games.
Oh yeah, Arbiter of Worlds. Yeah, sure. I was need to read a book on how cleaning up for role-playing gamers. I wrote a book on how to be a game master. Yeah, Arbiter
how's that for a masterful segue right there?
That was so good. I almost didn't understand where we were going. No, yeah, Arbiter of Worlds. It's on Amazon. It's it's really specifically about how to run sandbox games and why I think that's what you should be running. So it's kind of a philosophical treatise on my theory of fun in role-playing games, and then how best to manage that. Honestly, like, I think the most important thing, the most important line in that whole book, and I'll share it, maybe people buy the book if they want more, but as a game master, it's not your job to make sure people have fun. It's your job to make sure people have a chance to have fun. And that's a big difference, right? Because people come into your game session and maybe the guy just got fired, maybe he's going through divorce, maybe he had a big fight with his girlfriend or boyfriend. You can't control that, right? You can't make someone have fun. And I know so many GMs who sort of psychologically torture themselves over like, oh man, my session wasn't good, Bob didn't have a good time. They get really down, and it becomes this negative spiral of bad feeling, and they feel like they're failing as a GM. I liken it to it's like being a party host. Your job is to make sure that people could have fun, but what they do with it is up to them.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, it became so much more freeing to just run a game, and often just by being chill about it, like someone who comes in who's grouchy, well, just let him be grouchy. Bob's having a bad day, he just wants to kill some goblins. Let him kill some goblins. Like,
there you go. Yeah.
And anyway, so
yeah,
there's a lot more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, the book also contains numerous tips on how to create sort of specifically world building, create like an overarching concept, but then zoom into where the players actually start and build up from there, in order to keep like a consistent world, but one that isn't going to be like overbuilt for stuff that you're not going to be using.
Yeah, and the reason for that ties into the philosophy of what I call the agency theory of fun. And my thinking is, most people, most of the time in their lives, don't get to experience as much agency as they might like, which is that sense of being able to make free will decisions that matter. most people, most of the time, are kind of stuck in a rut or a routine, and the palette of options they have is limited, right? Like they can't just put on a backpack and go on an adventure.
Yeah.
And most forms of entertainment don't offer you any agency, right? You're along for the ride. You're watching the movie, you're reading the book, you're listening to the song.
Yeah.
Video games
yeah. I was gonna
offer
say, yeah, video games are a little bit more agency, but
more
even
agency,
then,
but
you
it's
are
still
within
limited.
certain corridors. Even for larger sandbox games, you're limited to what the
Exactly.
game is coded to do.
Exactly. But a sandbox RPG with a game master who's committed to player agency can genuinely create a truly powerful experience of agency. And I think a lot of people really crave that, and they don't even know that they want it until they experience it. Because most people have never had it, and they're like, wow, I really can do anything. And but to make that work, the second mistake people make is, it isn't just the ability to make choices, it's the ability to make choices that have meaningful consequences. Exactly. And so a big mistake people make, if you go into it and you can't die, you can't change the plot line because it's on a railroad.
You can't get your nuts chopped off through a bad roll in the moral wounds table.
Exactly. If there's no consequences, good or bad, then your choices actually don't matter. And so that means creating a world where the players can make those choices. They have to accept the consequences of those choices, but the consequences of the choices in turn create opportunities for more choices that matter.
Yeah, said nut chop then gives you a reason to go try to get some extra cash to pay for a priest to have you, cast the right spells to get them back.
Yes, that would
Lord
be an
knows
example.
I have had that happen in the Axe game or two.
Yes, exactly. And that's a very different philosophy than I think what is more widely practiced now, where the focus is no, the GM, your job is to be an entertainer who makes everyone have a good time. And look, there are some folks who are amazing at that, and they offer an experience. I personally think not that that's a bad experience. It's not it's a bad thing. I just think it's underutilizing a medium that can provide a more powerful experience. So,
yeah, well, that it's really a difference in basically what people are focused on in that regard. Like,
right.
Some people become GMs in order to tell a particular story or something like that.
That's right.
Which is completely broken if you try using a system that's focused more on sandbox play, because by that, any story you have is going to get fragmented as the players decide to go this way or that, which then the temptation is then to get them back on the rails by whatever means you can in order to get that story where it's supposed to be, where you think it's supposed to be going, when really the story is not yours to tell. It's yours to relate after it happens.
Exactly. So, or at least that's the philosophy I bring to game mastering, and that's the sort of games I design. And certainly there are other schools and lots of people having good fun in those as well. My company's motto is every campaign is a law unto itself. So I think every game master functionally is their own game designer in a sense, and their own judge, their own jury. So I think we have to be pragmatic, and we have to accept again what I said earlier, right? Not every game is for everyone. Not every game has to be for everyone. Not every campaign is for everyone.
Gaming is for everyone, and through that, everyone can find the game that they want and enjoy playing. It's not going to be the same game for everybody, but there's something for everybody.
Exactly. There should be something for everybody, but not everything has to be for everybody.
Exactly.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Exactly. So
and
a controversial yet true statement.
Controversial but true statement, and I think that's a perfect place to to settle this particular day on. So I would like to thank you very much for showing up here today and for discussing all these things, discussing your, as I mentioned previously, #1 bestseller on RPG Ascendant. Also, most excellent Axe, Adventurer Conqueror King, Arbiter of Worlds, author, game designer, Alexander Macris. Is there anything else you want to shout out while you're here before we leave?
No, man. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, it's no problem. My pleasure. So you can find this guy, shout out your websites and stuff like that.
Sure. It's autark.co for the official company website. You can find more about Ascendant at Instagram/Ascendant Comics or Facebook/Ascendant Comics. You can also join us on Discord there's invite links at the social media.
Perfect. Well, this has been Alexander Macris of Autark for Ascendant, Axe, Arbiter of Worlds, and Genuine awesome RPG Awesomeness. I've been Bastion, and thank you very much. And I will see you everybody next time. Adios.